try on Alpha's computer.
Mine won't work. It doesn't.
The output is really low.
Oh, okay. You mean, okay, you're not hearing us. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. It's we're hearing you, but we're straining. So.
Okay.
Huh? Oh, hi, Willa.
Yeah.
Let's try on this one, Willa. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Loud and clear.
Oh, that's better.
You're also loud and clear.
Okay. Great.
So I think you can start now.
Okay, guys, so I guess I'll just take the lead of this one. Unless there's someone else interested to do that. All right, so on this side, so far, there is me and Ada. I think that's all from us. And you guys, maybe you can say who's there.
Yeah, at this point we have Nick, Alfayo, Simon, and Eric.
Yeah. When we connect, we just come there. It is Willa.
Yeah.
When?
Yeah, and
Okay, so you have Alfayo, Eric,
Eric, Nick.
Okay, and El is not there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah, so we can start. Usually go through the review of the last week's to do. If you look at the last week's page, you will see that the first to do is Alfayo to present, which is actually one of the agendas of today's call, so we expect that to happen. The second is Alfayo and Eric to work on AMRS 326, which is about investigating the reason for HTML forms taking too long to load on production. I think we had some few things we decided that we were going to do. So maybe you guys, you can give us the status of that.
For that, when we tried, we didn't. Actually, the performance was very good when you have like when you do not have any data on your machine. When you have just a new machine and you have the instance, you don't have a lot of data, the form would load in 5 seconds or below 5 seconds. So we didn't carry out. We thought maybe the main issue is the amount of data that you are pulling from our server.
Okay, so is it exactly the same form?
The same form, yeah. In Derek's machine, it loads in less than 5 seconds.
Okay, so apart from the fact that maybe it's because we are dealing with a lot of data, did you guys establish any other theories around that problem?
No, we didn't establish any other theories because on our test environment it works fine, but when you go to the production, it will take at least 30 seconds. The other issue that I've not encountered is one that it fails to load completely. So I've not encountered that issue at all.
Okay, so you're saying that there was a point when people were reporting the forms was not loading at all?
Yeah, during our meeting on Thursday, it was reported that Agri reported that at some point the forms do not load. So we haven't been able to, okay, personally I've also not been able to experience that problem.
Okay.
So maybe for us to kind of replay that particular problem, it will require that maybe we just go with either a tablet, yeah, just to try out and see which, let's say, wireless connectivity that they're connecting on, and maybe just try to replay that, because Dr. Agri says he has experienced that severally, but for us, we have not been able to experience that.
Okay, yeah. I would say for now, maybe we can just stick to the fact that we need to make sure the form is not taking as long to load on production. And maybe that is very isolated problem. It could happen sometimes later, or maybe it won't happen again. Depends on. I mean, whenever we don't have to try to recreate the problem that much, it could be the issue with the wireless or whatever the problem is. The most important thing for now is to make sure that actually it doesn't take as long for load. So from what you are saying, it would make sense because from Ellen Ball's reaction, what you said is their forms have actually they do have more concepts than what we have on our phone, which would mean that if that was the case, then theirs should have been taking longer than ours, but we're taking longer. And when you put it on a machine that doesn't have data, it doesn't take as long, which means there's something to do with data. So, okay. So after that, did you guys try to investigate that exactly what kind of data is being, or how is it trying to communicate with the database so that it takes better time?
No, we didn't go into that detail.
Okay. So I think that is our next step. We should. Last week I was trying to point out that I think what happens is there are so many when you have all these orbs sections in the form, and then they probably one after another is trying to hit the orbs table, and when you do that, it doesn't take long for one piece, but when you combine all of them, it takes a lot of time, and that's why maybe when you put in, that's why when I try to put in trying to log the query that takes a longer time, I didn't find any because most likely, all of them, they don't take that much time. But when you add up all the time taken, then you get a lot of time. So, okay. Now, the issue is how to, we should try to figure out how to, that will mean we have to go in the code and see what's going on and see how we can optimize the code. Because it could be indexing, I would think of indexing the ops table, but the ops table is I think is one with a lot of indexes on it. Maybe the maximum, it is one with the most number of indexes on it. Okay. Well, at this point, I think the right direction is to just to investigate the code and see how the ops tag is being constructed whenever you're trying to load the form on the system. Any other ideas?
How do we plan to do that? Can we just go in and see how that is being constructed and try to use some breakpoints to see how it's loading that?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Okay, so the problem with that, breakpoint, the problem with that, if you do it, okay, now that is a problem because you can, okay, the test server, do we have the same amount of information in the test server as we have it on production? I think we haven't updated that test server for a very long time.
Right.
Yeah, so although it is relatively close to, what you can do is when you try to load the form on test server, how long does it take? Does it take as long as it takes on the production, or does it take less time?
I've never, personally, we've never tried it on the test server.
Yeah,
So
okay.
try that. Yeah.
Because I don't think we
We
want.
tried on the forms development server, the test server for the forms, the one that we are using, and the form server. So on the form server, it was varied depending on the actual, I think, the load. And again, at one point in time, the form server had very low disk space, and so at that time it was taking too long. But after they did some revision, it was better. So perhaps we would just have to have the data in the test server, because I know a test server has a lot of data. We could try to use that one and see whether we can reproduce. Then can we? Can we use, maybe if we could, then we could do breakpoints in the test server.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We don't want to be running a debugger on production. That's why. That's why I was asking about the test server. Unless we really have to, yeah, at some point, if we do really have to do that, then we can do that maybe on weekends and days like those. But otherwise, we should avoid as much as possible to run the debuggers on production, because it will neglect the production, and I don't think you guys want to stay there during the night to do that. So that's what I was asking. Now, the first step will be to try to load that form on test server. I guess I have typed the thing somewhere. So we need to be able to try to load the form on test server and see how long it takes. Then after that, if it takes as much time as it takes on production, then we'll say that we have the same problem on both servers. It means if we fix it on most likely, or at least we can be sure, 90% sure, that if we fix it on test server, then it is fixed on production as well. And then we can run debugger. So that is the first task, is to make sure that we can, how much to test, what amount of time does it take to load it on test server. If we find that, then compare the production. If it is not very different, then we can use the test server. Otherwise, I think you will have to use the, we can use the research server also. I think it has forms, right?
Research server, I think so.
Yeah, so I want to avoid using, okay, the point is I want to avoid using the production server as much as possible.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we should, I think we have reached a conclusion there. We have to do that and then establish those breakpoints in the module. And you guys, if you need some help in order to set, I'm used to set that up. So if you haven't done that before, you don't have to go through a lot of Googling and taking a lot of time to figure it out. You can just ask me and then you can set it up together, and then it will be easy.
Exactly.
So just do that for us to make our life easier.
But that's what I was
thinking. I don't want to be doing it for you. I want us to do it together, so that next time you can just do it.
Right. So can we schedule a time where we can do that together?
Yeah. So your first task is to try to see how long does it take to load on production, or does it even load at all on production? Make the form load on production, see the time, and if it matches, then let's try to configure the debugger. We can configure the debugger. It's fine without even doing that, so that you can use it in other problems. But for this specific case, I think the steps should be for you to try to do that and see how it works with the test server. And then after that, we can easily find a time. I mean, you guys always, we find some time and then we chat during especially in the morning for me and in the evening for you. So any day is fine. When you are ready, you can say, okay, let's do it, we'll do it.
I think let's prioritize to do this tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
tomorrow morning?
Yeah, so we can plan to do that the first thing in the morning, just comparing how long that takes. That will not take a very long time for us to do that.
Yeah, okay, fine. So, yeah, so since for you it will be in the evening, you can try to figure out what's going on with the test table in the morning, and then in the evening, we can do that. Your evening, which will be my morning, will be doing that configuration.
So that means at 3:30 during the scrum.
Yeah, that's fine. Or even before Scrum. Like, yeah, during the Scrum is fine, I guess. 3:30, which will be 30 in my time.
Okay, I think let's do it at 3:30 then.
Okay, fine. So that's that. It's done.
Now 3:30, I've just noticed that we have a call from 4, so 30 minutes might not be enough.
Actually, you're right. It's not might not be enough. I don't think it is enough. So if we can't, actually, we can do this. We'll try to do it from 8. What about 3:20 or 3:15? Let's try to do it from 3:15. If it is done, then we'll do it later, maybe on Friday. Or if you guys, you can spare like 1 hour after that, then you can finish it.
Okay, so let's plan for 3:15 tomorrow. Just in case we don't finish, we can push it to Friday.
Yeah, okay. Fine.
Okay, and then that I think one of the pending thing that on the issue of the HTML form from the recent discussion, we want to change the search so that like when you are pulling the providers, we should pull the provider IDs, it's not the provider, the user IDs, the system ID of the provider instead of the user names. So that's something that I've been asked to figure out whether we are able to do that. Because the form entry guys are used to system IDs and not the names of the providers.
I've not tested out this, but I think, Willa, there are two things here. There is the system ID and the provide ID.
Yes.
Personally, I've not checked if the HTML form entry searches using the provide ID. But if it's able to search using the provide ID, then it would be good to maybe advise the system admins, because right now all providers are supposed to have at least a provide ID instead of using the system ID.
Okay.
Are they giving different numbers?
Oh, okay. Welcome.
They're system generated numbers, but with the provide ID, it gives even an opportunity to define the whatever format you want.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, but go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I hope they're not giving, because they've used system ID forever, or they did up until when provider became available. I would hope that they didn't just start handing out different IDs to everybody, and so now everybody has two identifiers that are different.
Yeah, and under the hood, back when we were talking about system ID, are we talking about? I think we were talking about that system ID in the users table, right?
Yes, it's the identifier, like a user-friendly identifier that is generated when a user account's created.
Yeah, and it's specifically called system ID in that table, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we have the provide. Now, when Eric is saying the provide ID, I don't think, Eric, you're referring to that system, the internal ID. You're referring to the provider identifier, right?
Right. They provide. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that they've used the system ID for years at AMPATH to identify you as the provider ID, and so my hope is that they would just use, copy that. If they're going to use a provider ID, that they would just copy whatever the system ID is and not create yet another number.
Right, but I think that should be fine. And maybe what we just need to test out is once we are using that particular system ID, can we use the same to search within when we are looking for providers? And I think if that works, then that would be the best workaround for that.
Okay, so but in order for that to work, then we have to make sure. Okay, but if we are using, if they are different, you can still use them, I guess, because if you just have to know whether you're using system ID or provider ID, right?
Yeah, I mean, technically, now that providers exist within AMRS, we could use provider ID, but given the history that they've used system identifier for years, ideally we would copy over everybody's system ID to their provider ID, and so there, when you look at a form from 2 years ago and you see a provider's identifier, even though it was a system ID, it was using system ID 2 years ago. When you look them up and search against provider IDs, you would find the same person.
I agree.
Okay, so what if
so you need a process to populate the provider ID instead of just having someone randomly assign that or just throwing out random numbers for that. Have a process to populate the provider identifier from system ID.
Okay, that makes sense. Also, maybe in our searching, when you are searching in the HTML, you should be able to, when you type in either the name or the provider ID, the system ID should be able to retrieve the provider.
I think it'll be a little bit more challenging to try to, and it'll get confusing if we're searching system ID in some places and provider ID in other places. Because when they're looking for providers, you could get inconsistency if anybody who's writing any code or any module or any functionality to search providers is going to search provider IDs. They're not going to search system ID. And so if we try to create some hacks to look at system ID, then it will be a continuous challenge to maintain that. I think you'd probably be better off to populate provider ID with whatever value you want it to be.
Besides, I think it's not imposed that every provider should be a user. That's some providers who are not users, right?
Correct. That's the idea of part of the idea of introducing providers. You could have providers that are from external systems.
Yeah.
So then it won't make sense for us to
Can I ask you guys a question of the definition for provider here? When we say provider, what does it actually mean? Does it include like other roles such as like nurses and?
Yeah, provider is anyone who provides care to the patient.
Okay, I think that is we encounter some similar issues with Uzima implementations. When some of the roles like not actually provider, it become problematic and then sent to the error queue. I think it's good just for us to clear what provider means here. I think it's going to apply for the form entry as well.
Yeah, well, the definition that we've used, in designing the system is a provider is anyone who's providing care for the patient, which could, could be anyone from a nurse to a clerk to a doctor.
Yeah, because I think some people get confused with the, what we understand provider, anyone provide cares to the clients, to there's a role in the production saying that is provider. I think we need to kind of distinguish them because people just by default thought that, provider is a role, one of the roles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know, where do we stand now? How does that help us?
Will, I missed that. Just repeat again.
Yeah, no, Ada just was trying to clarify what a provider is. I mean, how does it work with the from what we've been discussing using the provider IDs, how does it affect what we are doing? And do you think there is something we are doing wrong?
Actually, I don't know enough to say. I think it's good for us just to better understanding, what provider means here, and then go back and compare, different roles, the user roles that we assign, what the providers, one of the roles is called provider. What does it actually mean? And then I just think that we just need to document it clearly.
Okay.
And just like stick with it. So it's just avoid any confusions.
All right, but from the development perspective, I think if we just say a provider is somebody who is stored in the provider table, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, provider cares to the client.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
So what do we advise the users who have requested us to make this change?
Okay, the change was they want us to search for the provider ID instead of the system ID. Is that what you said?
Yeah, what I was saying, you have that number with the check digit. I would assume that is the system ID. So when the clinicians fill out the forms, when they complete the form, they just write their IDs. They don't write the names.
Yes.
So
the good news is that just from a random sampling on production, the provider identifiers seem to be copies of the system ID, which is good.
So do you think we should have enabled this module to search so that at least they can use that, or we tell them no, we will have to check.
If the data assistants want to be able to look by the identifier as well as the name, I think that's fine, and I think the search box is already designed for that. So I don't know which search they're looking through, but the idea is that now that provider exists, the numbers that the doctors are writing down has always been their system ID, because there was no such thing as a provider object or a provider identifier in earlier versions of AMRS, of OpenMRS. So they've always been writing the number that they've been assigned, and that was their system ID. Now that we have provider records, those system IDs are being copied over as a provider identifier to serve that function. So when the doctor, it's a subtle difference, but when the doctor writes down that number, what we're saying going forward is they're writing down their identifier as a provider, not their identifier as a user of some computer program, which happens to be AMRS. So but I believe what I heard from you is that the assistants just want to be able to search by the number as well as the name. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So what you want to be searching against is not system ID. You want to be looking against the provider identifier. And if you go into manage providers, the default search is provider name or ID, and that ID it's looking against is the provider identifier.
Mark, you are saying that is actually the behavior right now?
Well, it's the behavior of the field when you're managing providers. I don't know what field they're using. If they're in form entry or some InfoPath tool in a sidebar or wherever they are searching for people, that code is probably looking against system IDs. And maybe it got switched to look against providers, and now it just searches by name and not by name or ID. So it completely depends what field they're searching in, but my guess is that if they're complaining they can't search by number, is that we probably switched from searching system IDs to and users to searching for providers, and when we did that, we made the search just look for names instead of names or provider identifier.
Okay, so
I'd like to know the exact field they're complaining about.
Yeah, that would be great to know.
Which ticket is this?
No, that request came in today. I haven't created the ticket.
Okay, so once we have the ticket, it should it should explain exactly kind of what the user is trying to do and where in the system, and what behavior they expect.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes.
assuming that we had something that was searching users by name or system ID, and we updated it. Now that we have providers, we updated it to search providers. I'm guessing that they're in some part of the application, whether it's through form entry or whatever, that they're in a field that is now, instead of searching users in the system, is searching providers. And how when that got refactored, when that got changed, it's just searching provider names and not searching provider names or provider identifiers. And that's probably, I'm guessing that's what the problem is.
Yeah, so I think maybe what I will do, just to be sure about that, I will try to just identify one provider and also look at what is the identifier and try searching using the identifier that has been provided. Then I'll give feedback if it's able to search using that.
Okay. Yeah, but before you do that, that's what you were saying. It's great to know exactly what are they requesting about. What is the exact field that they're trying to access in order to get that provider?
I think from what I got from Alpha is currently or ever since the providers have been using the system ID. So the clerk just types in the system ID and all other details about that particular provider would be displayed. But as it is, HTML form entry is not allowing them to search using that particular system ID.
Okay, so it is HTML form entry. Okay.
Right.
Exactly, yeah, that's true. That's what we want.
Okay, but we don't want to search system ID, even though they may be thinking of it as that. That their system ID is the identifier for a user, and what we're doing is instead of searching against users, we're searching providers. Providers do have an identifier, and for AMPATH, we are copying over for all providers that are also users in the system. You know, for all AMPATH providers, they automatically are getting the. It looks like as part of creating their provider record, they're using the system ID as the provider identifier. So they're copying that value. It's not a user and a user system ID. It's a provider record and a provider identifier.
We have tested. You can't search using the system ID, so just tested. I think it's only allowing the name, unless we should look at the HTML form entry module and see whether we can maybe make a change to that tag. Yes.
The best thing would be to create a ticket on the HTML form entry project on the OpenMRS Jira and describe what the issue is.
Okay.
And remember, if you're searching providers, then no one will understand if you say we need to be able to search system IDs, because that won't make any sense, because you'll say I'm searching for providers and I need to look at a user property.
Yeah.
And that won't make sense to them. What you want to do is what it sounds like you're saying is that there's a field in HTML form entry searching for providers. It searches only by name and doesn't allow you to search by provider identifier.
Yeah, right.
That is right, Buck.
Will I have a small question?
Yeah, sure.
The same provider definition.
Yeah.
When you create a user and you assign that user the provider's role, it doesn't automatically create an entry in the provider table. It's kind of like you have to go to manage providers on the MRS interface, and then you manually create that record. Why was it designed this way? Because initially what we thought is that automatically when you assign a user the provider role, then we shall have that user entered into the provider table.
Yeah, Simon, you're talking to the chief architect himself. Bart is going to answer you. Bart, please.
Sorry, I was distracted.
Yeah, so Simon is asking, okay, maybe Simon, you can repeat the question yourself.
Yeah, the question is, when you create a user and you assign that user the provider's role, what we thought is that automatically that user's record would be entered into provider table. But what we learned today is that you have to manually go to the manage provider section and create and save that user so that the user is saved in provider table. So we're asking, why was it designed this way? Because we thought automatically it should happen. You don't have to, again, manually do it from the manage providers section.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There is. I don't know that we currently have a link. We should have one, but we don't yet have a link. It's only inferred through person, which, the link between a provider and a user account. So provider is designed to specify caretakers and identify people that are caring for patients, both within and outside the system. So a consultant seeing the patient, at a different hospital, and so it's not assumed that every provider will be a user of the system. The fact that you create new users and you say this user is also a provider, I don't know, when you say copy the user information, are you saying that it's not creating a provider identifier with the...
I think, Mark, what Simon is saying is he's talking about the role. There's a role called provider, right, Simon?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the confusion. That's where the confusion comes in.
You're assigning the role of provider to someone.
To user, yeah, and actually a user is not assumed to be a provider right away. So when you create a user, they're independent. And the role provider is just named that way. It doesn't have anything to do with the provider table. That's why you don't have that link created.
Yeah, the roles have been are basically were designed to allow privileges in the system, and we've really only had roles functionally that help manage those privileges within the system. So meaning that when you assign a role to somebody, whether it's provider or anything else, really what you're saying is, what can this person do in the, what are they allowed to do in the application? And where the confusion comes is that many people look at roles and they also want to assign organizational roles. They want to say this is a doctor, or this is a provider, this is a nurse, and those don't always align with what the person should be able to do with the system. Typically they do, but they don't always. So we ended up with provider roles that were, the default role, default privileges someone should have in the system. Mostly because roles were because they've been hard for implementations to manage or understand. Several of our key implementations that have been doing coding, like Partners in Health, have taken what I consider a bad practice of just giving everyone, all rights in the system, making everyone a super user, and ignoring the API level privileges, and then coding into the application, into the web application, the behaviors that people should do. So part of what we're seeing, and the reason that the provider role isn't tied in, is because provider role existed long before there was a provider in the system as a separate object, and the work to say, when you say this person's a provider, to give them the appropriate roles that you would assume should happen, that work no one has ever taken on.
Yeah, because I think it has created some confusion on our side. We have been experiencing errors, processing errors where the system complains of no provider with a certain person ID. And when we check in the user records for that particular person, we see the person has a provider role. So we're wondering, so why is the system not...
There's a big difference between a provider role and someone being a provider.
Okay.
So the provider role is someone assigned a particular, to OpenMRS, the provider role is just another role with the name. It doesn't it's not, there's not an assumption that if you magically make the name, a role named provider, that they'll be granted, they'll be understood to be, either a doctor or a nurse or something like that. How can I explain this clearly? So roles were used to manage privileges in the system, and unfortunately, one of them was called provider. And so people assume that, okay, well, that must be the way I make someone a provider. That is just one convenience grouping of privileges in the system. How the user can use the system. When you get that error that there's no provider record, that has nothing to do with privileges or authorization. It's looking in the provider table for a record for that person.
Yeah. So Mark, actually, Simon, I think what he was wondering is why was the system designed that way? So the short version of the answer is there was a provider role, and then the provider object came in, and they are not linked. So the provider is just any other role. When you create it's just like that provider role was named, like, let's say Simon. It wouldn't have anything to do with the provider table. That's why.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
There's some history there, and I've long struggled to try to get us to where there's a distinction between organizational roles and application roles, and they started to introduce the notion of that into the reference application, but it's very easy when people see roles to think, oh, this person's a doctor, this person's a nurse, this person's a provider. That's what their job title is, but that doesn't necessarily mean what what things should they be able to do in the system. Sometimes you find a nurse that because they're also enrolled in medical school, they're a medical student and should be able to do certain things, or you have certain nurses that have other privileges in the system. And so when you tie one-to-one what someone's job is, what their job title is, with their privileges in the system, it works for the simple cases and then starts to fall apart. And so early on, provider got created as a role in the system, and it's just caused headaches for us. And as Will is saying, because of that history, provider, that role still sits there, and people make assumptions about it, but it has nothing to do with the provider table. Ideally, the link would be made that when you go and say someone's a provider, and I believe this was coded into the reference application, like in OpenMRS 2, that when you go to say someone's a provider, that there's some suggestion of, oh, you probably want to give them these roles. But that doesn't exist in the current version of OpenMRS we're using.
Okay, thanks.
And back just on the same, when you look at the provider table, it has this field called name. I was wondering why it is there, because I think like for our 2,000 providers, we only have two names being populated. Was it to be the same person name, or what was this field to be?
I think the intent of the names for a provider was for those people that we have provider records that are not persons in the person table. So one of the use cases that we wanted to support for the provider table was that, say, an insurance company or a payer or the government, like a ministry, comes and says, here is all the doctors in Western Kenya. Here's a list of 10,000 doctors in Western Kenya. with their official, ministry identifier. You could populate your provider table and say, okay, we know and we can make reference to all the providers in Western Kenya now, even thousands of them. You don't have to create a person record for every one of those. In those cases, the provider name would be, you would just, whatever the ministry gave you you would throw into the name field. But when a provider is a local provider, you probably have a person record, a user record. Then the person name is going to be more appropriate or more valuable.
Does the UI support that?
Ideally, it would be something that the provider object, if there was a person, it would use the person's name. If there wasn't a person, then it would use the provider name. I don't know if that got coded that way, but that was the intent.
But the database will not, because of the constraint. I'm just seeing the constraint on the person table, on the person ID. You won't allow us to save, or what do you think?
Come again, Alpha?
Okay, when you look at that table, it has a person ID referencing the person table.
Yes.
So if we don't provide a person ID, I would believe it will not allow you to save entry without the person ID.
No, person ID is optional.
Yeah, it could be null, I think. Yeah.
Person ID can be null.
Or you can just try it yourself and see.
Okay, we'll try.
Yeah.
We now know. We know the intent, at least.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes and we haven't done anything about the data model. Maybe, okay. So, Alpha, do you think you can take this up in 10 minutes?
Yeah, we can start discussing the data model.
Okay. So, the floor is all yours.
Unless we have any other questions, because I'm seeing guys are saying the time is so small, so short.
But you are the one presenting. I mean, if you think you're
we are discussing, I'm only leading. If I realize this data model, some of these things I even don't know. So we will be discussing together.
Yeah, okay. I think we can get somewhere. Just start. Let's see where we get with the 10 minutes. We can understand one part of the data model, I guess.
Okay. So I'm going to paste the link to the data model page that we're looking at. So I've pasted, and I don't know whether we should share that screen so that we look at the model together.
Alpha, you're trying to share the data model?
Yeah, the page, so that we can.
No, don't worry, because you can access it. You can just explain it, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Unless those guys in Kenya, they want you sharing it with them, and you can do it there locally.
We are on one computer, so we are looking at one machine. It's loading.
Oh, okay. So, guys, I think it's kind of unrealistic to do anything in 7 minutes. I don't know, but I don't think it's very productive. But the reason I'm saying that is because there's something else also. I think I added it there, and I almost forgot. Yesterday we were discussing about the resolving of the errors in the HL7 queue, and you guys had some tasks to do. And maybe you should share that and see where we are, where we stand at this moment. Alfaro.
Okay, come back. Okay, I didn't hear the question. I heard the part of we were discussing about HL7Q.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is it's unrealistic to expect anything in 6 minutes. So I think maybe it's best if you can just update what you did, what we discussed. We had some discussion, we had some to-dos that we agreed yesterday, and I think it's best if we come to the same page and know what is going on with this, especially with the XSLT and the forms and the form server.
So basically, I checked using the approach that you suggested. I checked looking at the globe storage table against the form resource. There were when you search through that, there are two issues. Okay, that was part of the issue. So basically, you told me to check and see whether we have any other forms that do not have XSLT. So when I did that query, I realized like every value reference from the form resource table had a value in the globe storage. So what I realized was like 8 forms might be having a problem, but I had not found why, because if you count distinct from the form resource table, the value reference from the form resource, you find we have like 207, and the total items in that table we have 215. So we have like 8 or 7 forms that might be having a problem. We also
sorry, what is the ticket number again?
Ticket number, I can't remember.
Okay. Yeah, it's best if we keep on the. Okay, later on then we'll have to check the ticket and update that. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
So that one, as you suggested, I looked at it. We also found like the problem we had on 350. Actually, they didn't have XSLT in the other one. I also looked at the patients that were there. The majority of the patients were missing, but I didn't manage to complete like doing the categorization of those errors. I'm still working on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think on the same note, Willa, you remember we said that the main problem is simply that the gold or the form server is not updated, and the same is being maybe the production is being updated. So this morning I talked to the systems admin and just informed them why the same error would recur. So I informed them they need to update the form server with the same things they have updated on the production, so that that particular problem does not recur when they are moving gold to production.
Yeah, that's great. But I think actually we can help them do that, especially updating the system with the current XSLT, the form server, so that we don't have, the thing with this kind of task. Like the system admins, they are actually doing a good job to make sure that these systems are functioning. And sometimes because they might not be aware we understand what the system needs or how the system works and what the XSLT is doing. So when you put it there, it's easy for us to see and make sure that actually the system is right and it does what it's supposed to be doing. So this kind of task, usually I just happen to communicate with the system admin and I'm like, okay. Or especially I'm communicating with the forms, the FCT, the forms and concepts team, and then I tell them, we need this thing, and they just put it there, and then we close the ticket, and say, okay, now the form server is updated with the XSLT that is required to run. I just kind of think that is easier than expecting the system admins to do that, because I don't think it works very nicely if we do it that way.
And again, when we were discussing this even this morning, I was telling, I think they do not expect when you create a new form, they do not expect to add an XSLT. So they expect that when you create it, automatically will come with them. To create the, I don't know. There is a misconception that when you have a new form, you don't need to add it. Because when I talked about the 350, and they said, no, this is a new one. Or this one was old. Even they couldn't understand why the XSLT was missing on that form.
Yeah,
But it is
someone deleted it.
in the form server, it wasn't there.
Yeah. So I think yesterday I explained that the reason you don't need to upload the XSLT, if you're duplicating a form, you're actually duplicating everything about it. The only thing that I have to confirm, I think I encountered somewhere when I was testing these forms, is when you actually do duplicate the form, you'll be referencing the same XSLT. So whatever changes you make on the one, you're actually affecting both forms. That's the only thing. But otherwise, you will see when you can try duplicating a form on your local instance, you will see that it has an XSLT defined, if the other form has an XSLT. So that's why. So,
and the item that I mentioned earlier, do you think we need to look at it, or we, like I said, we have like 215 forms and we have only unique value reference for 208. Do you think we need to look at them and ensure we have unique ones, or there's no problem? What do you think?
Yeah, I think every individual form has to have its own resources in order to avoid confusion and collision when you're editing one or the other. So yeah, it's good to do that.
And then maybe we should also have a process, because they were telling me they don't put XSLT on unpublished forms. So maybe it's like, even when I'm looking at the adult return form, it is not published. So maybe we should just say whether it's published or not, we should have it, unless you have any reservation on it.
Okay, and the reason for not putting XSLT there, yeah, that is the system admins, right?
The system admins were the ones who were telling me that.
Yeah, I think the system admin, back then when they were trying to update those XSLT, because they were doing it manually, it was a hectic job for them, because they had to go to every form, open the form resource, click that manage, upload. It's very tedious. So they just said, okay, you know what, we're not going to do it on the published forms, because the reason is they're not used anyway, so why bother? That's why. But if you have a method of doing it and putting the right XSLTs, even on those unpublished ones, it's good, because when they are published, then you are sure that you're not publishing things that are going to produce errors. Otherwise, you might forget and you publish and it doesn't have XSLT. The messages are not translated correctly. You have all these other problems creeping up in the system. So that is what the reason. And actually, that is specifically, I remember that because I was communicating with them that time, with Miencha and Victor, when they were doing this. So it's good to have, we don't have any reason not to have the XSLT on the unpublished forms.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we are over our time by 2 minutes. It was a really nice call. And just guys, in Kenya, it's very important that, I think I've stressed this so many times, and I think you guys will agree with me, we need to have these tickets, because that's where we're keeping track of things. So Alpha, if we didn't have the ticket about the problems that we were dealing with a couple of days ago, we should have had it. And since it's not over yet, it's good to have the ticket and have the history and all the tracking information. And you also should be updating the tickets regularly. Yeah, I just wanted to remind about that, and I'm reminding myself as well. Yeah, I know we don't like tickets and updating, but that's the best. That's the only way we can use to know what we are doing and keep track of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, we will struggle trying to update. Mostly we work on them, but we don't do any updates.
Yeah.
So we can improve on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what about Nikki? Is Nikki doing the introductory tickets? Anyone?
I think Nick is here to catch up, to take up any introductory ticket. And
Okay.
you remember, Willa, the ball is still in your court and JJ.
Yeah, but we do have introductory tickets. We just haven't prioritized the others, so you can pick up any of those. Okay,
So
what-
should we wait for priorities or just pick any?
as far as the introductory tickets are concerned, it's okay. You can pick any of those that have been marked as introductory. We have those, and Alpha and Nick is there, right? He's hearing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there.
Because if you ask me, I don't know what is an introductory ticket.
Yeah, Alpha knows that. So Alpha, why don't you work with Nikki and see which ticket you can pick and start working on it?
Okay, I will do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So,
Okay.
any other business?
Not really.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I was looking for this ticket, I couldn't find. Where is it? I mean, that's introductory. No. Is this